get put into a pentest and you're told it's an internal and you aren't given any credentials. Your first thinking is, okay, what environment am I on? If you're in an Active Directory environment, you're thinking through how do users use this environment? How do they function within this environment? This video, I want to focus in on some of the techniques that you can use to gather credentials, to harvest credentials in unlikely and possibly likely places that users may save or misconfigure different technologies, different situations, and that we as pen testers, as hackers, can take advantage of to then highlight the vulnerabilities and move ourselves into initial access on a system. In this video, I'm going to be showcasing the initial foothold of the escape box, because this has three very interesting approaches to credential gathering that I think would be really helpful for us to understand. And we're in my virtual machine and we're going to do a typical Nmap scan. So we're doing a scan of 10.10.11.202. We want to do verbose, scan all ports, and then an aggressive scan. We also want to do a minimum rate of 5,000. Now on an internal pen test, we wouldn't actually do this because we don't want to bring things down. So we know that this is a Windows box by a few things. So we have port 53 open, 139, 135. We also have 1443, which is a Microsoft SQL server. We have LDAP with 389, and 5985 is WinRM. So now that our Nmap scan is done, we can start looking through our results. So first of all, we will see a couple of things. We have a DNS server, we have Kerberos running, so we know that this is some sort of server within an Active Directory environment. We also have Microsoft Windows Active Directory LDAP, and we can see that the domain is sql.hdb. We also can see that from the LDAP certificate, we have dc.sql.hdb, which is the machine that we are scanning. And we can also see, as I said before, 1433 is Microsoft SQL Server 2019. We also have down here the 5985, which is Windows Remote Management server, and then a whole bunch of RPC ports. Which is a typical thing to see when you have Windows Remote Management running here. So with 96% confidence, this is a Microsoft Windows 2019 server running SQL, Microsoft SQL. So we also know that, so if we go back up here, we will note that we have 445. And it's always important to note this, because what we want to do with port 445 is check for SMB. So I will switch over to this pane and we will do a simple SMB client -10.10.11.202-L, which is to list. And here we're hoping to see if we have a null session available so that we can log in and have a view of what the share is. So it's going to ask me for authentication. We're just going to go enter. And we have our shares. So we have an admin share, C drive, IPC, netlogon, and a different share here called public, and your typical sysvol. So we know that this is most likely a domain controller from sysvol, IPC, and netlogon, but the public share is what we are interested in, because this is an open share that we may be able to see and read. We could check with netexec. SMB 10.10 11.202 shares. Obviously that doesn't work because we don't have any credentials at this time. But if we did, we could, I guess we could potentially do a -u -p. Yeah, so for some reason it doesn't run, but that doesn't matter. So we can go back to SMB client here. And what we'll do is we will log in to public. This should let us in. It's taking a long time. There we go. All right. So we can list help to see all the commands with SMB client. But basically we have our typical commands like in any Linux, Unix thing. So we can use ls, and that should give us a list of directories and files. And the first thing that we see is SQL Server Procedures PDF. So what we'll do is we'll copy that. What we'll do is we will use the get command. We'll need to put it in quotes because it's got spaces, and we'll download that file. Again, this is taking a long time. Now, we will have a look here. Alright, so what we'll do is we'll use Firefox to open up SQL Server, and we have our SQL Server procedures here. So what we'll need to do is make sure we read through this to make sure that we don't have anything that we're missing. Since last year, we've got quite a few accidents with our SQL servers. Looking at you, Ryan, with your instance on the DC, why should you even put a mock instance on the DC? So Tom decided it was a good idea to write a basic procedure on how to access and then test any changes to the database. Of course, none of this will be done on the live server. We cloned the DC mockup to a dedicated server. Tom will remove the instance from the DC as soon as he comes back from his vacation. The second reason behind this document is to work like a guide when no senior can be available for all juniors. So then it goes through some, authentication stuff, accessing from domain joined machine, accessing from non-domain joined machine, what you need to do. So we know that we have a Ryan user, a Brandon user, and a Tom user. And then as we scroll down, we find bonus for new hired and those that are still waiting for their users to be created and perms assigned can sneak a peek at the database with user public user and password guest user can't write one. Refer to the previous guidelines and make sure to switch to Windows authentications to switch the Windows authentication to SQL Server authentication. So firstly, we have some credentials exposed on this document. So problem number one is the fact that we can access the SMB server here without credentials. That's problem number one. Problem number two is staff are now saving credentials within documents like PDFs that are on these open shares that if you're on the network, you can access, which means that anyone within this organization can access this. That's a big problem. We don't want that. within our organizations. But for us as pen testers, for us as hackers, this is great. So now we have some credentials. We can then use that for more initial access. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this notepad here, and we will put our public user and AEST user account. Right, so we have our password and our username here. So now that we've got that, we'll close this out. We will try to see what kind of access we have. SMB public user -p. There you go. And so we'll give this a go and see what NetExec comes up with. Nothing. So obviously this comes through, the public user comes through as a guest, because any kind of user would come out through as a guest. Because this user is for the SQL server, and we know we have a SQL server, we can go MS SQL and we'll run that. And what NetExec does, it will attempt to authenticate using the provided credentials, and then from there we may be able to use the modules. So it didn't work in this case, but the way that MS SQL works is that it has a Windows auth and a SQL Server auth. The difference between the two is basically that Windows auth relies on the actual Windows authentication protocols and the way that Windows handles authentications, whereas the SQL Server auth is handled by the SQL database within MS SQL. So that's basically the difference. In this case, we'll need to set local auth and see whether it gives us a different kind of access. We have a successful logon here. So we know that it's a local authentication because it's going to the DC, and it's worked because of this plus symbol. All right, so now what we can do is we will clear that screen, and we can use Impacket's MS SQL client. We'll specify the username, colon, and then the password, and then at the IP address or the host name if you've added it to your Etsy host files. So I'll do that. And now we have a shell on here. We can type in help. These are ones that are native to Impacket's MS SQL client. And we can use these to do different things. It kind of shortens the things you need to do in order to figure out like how to perform certain attacks or certain actions on the database. So we want to do a couple of things first. So we want to first verify is my user account like a sysadmin, and we want to know what other user accounts exist with here. So we'll use the built-in enum underscore users, and this should return who the users are. And so we have our login name, the SA, which is our default SQL admin. We have guest, information schema, and sys. So there isn't much here that we can go off because these are just like standard user accounts for Microsoft SQL. What we can then have a look at is there's two functions that we could do. So either we can get a shell using MS SQL using the XP command shell command, or we can use XP directory. So what we'll do is we'll try this one because we want to know if we can do that, and then we'll try this second one. So if we go XP command shell, and then we'll just do a simple who am I. And it usually helps if you spell it correctly. All right, so the execute permission was denied. So we'll need to have a look and see if we can enable it. We can do a execute sp configure show advanced options 1. And we figured out that we don't actually have permissions to run this. So if we did have permissions to run this, we could potentially reconfigure the server to allow us to run XP command shell, because sometimes our user is allowed to run it, but it's not actually enabled. So that's the difference. In this case, we can't. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to try to do the XP dir tree. And then what we can specify is just any address, and what we'll do is we'll just point it at itself, and it worked. So because that worked, we can then specify this, and it didn't get out the things that we wanted, but what we can do is we can go back to our this window. We'll exit out of SMB client and we'll fire up responder on the interface ×0 because I'm connected to the VPN, and we'll run that. So when that's running, we will go back here. What we'll want to do is we want to enter in the IP address 14.40/ please subscribe, and we'll run that. And as we can see in this pane, we captured the hash. So that's a cool, like, I found that a really nifty trick, because you could potentially, like, we have a very low privileged user, we perform this attack, we get the password hash, and we could do a bunch of, like, a couple of things here, but the main one would be to take this offline and crack it, which is what we're going to do. So I will go over to here. Let's put this, what was the name of that user? That was SQL Service. The name of the user was SQL Service. All right. So do that. SQL Service hash. We'll paste that in there. And we'll go hashcat -m. And it's 5600 SQL Server hash. And we'll crack it with RockU because most hack-the-box machines use RockU. Now it will take a little bit to run depending on your machine and the specs. Is to, again, use netexec to perform like a password check. I'm not sure why the SMB module isn't working for me, and I don't know whether it's because like SMB isn't very strong on this machine, or if it's not supporting like user authentication. It's meant to be open. Oh, so we have it here. So there's a connection error. Alright, so what we'll do is we'll try MS SQL. Alright, so we have the ability to log in with MS SQL there, but we want more, right? Like we want to actually get some remote access on this machine. That would be really great. So we'll use WinRM because we noticed that we had that 5985 open, and we have our typical pwned. What this means in netexec is that when you get pwned, you have administrator privileges within that protocol. So we can now log into the system using evil WinRM. All right, so we've got evil WinRM-I with the IP address, the username, and the password. So we've gathered credentials from an open SMP share, which has given us very low level access to a Microsoft SQL server. Then we were able to get that server to authenticate to us, and we captured the password hash for the SQL service account, and then we cracked that, and now we've logged in using WinRM, using evil WinRM to the server. So from here we can see who, I don't have that on the right place, who am I, and we can see that we're the SQL service user. Now the final technique that I kind of want to go over is searching within logs. We know from experience that people enter in passwords wrong, and sometimes they get flustered. And so logs usually capture a lot of that kind of information, and so we can kind of find out where stuff is, what may be of value from logs. Since this user is a service account, it could potentially be overprivileged, and so we may be able to access certain logs, especially if the logs pertain to the Microsoft SQL server. In that case, we may be able to gather some credentials from there. So we want to see what's in, and we have our typical perf logs, program files, public, users, Windows, and our SQL server. So what we want to do is we want to go into our SQL server, have a look what's in there, and we have a logs file. So we'll go into there and we'll have a look at what's in there, and we have error log.back. What we can do to kind of speed up, because usually these things are pretty big, is we can run a get child command, get child item dash path, and we want to look here, we want to recurse and look in files, and then we want to select, and what do we want to select? We want to select string dash pattern, and the thing we want to look for is password. That's what we want to see. All right, so we'll run that, and this will go and look in this folder for any kind of strings that match the pattern of password. And we find a couple of lines where things may help us out. So we see a logon failed for user Ryan Cooper, and then we see the logon failed again, but they've entered in this random string, nuclear mosquito 3. So we know that there isn't a user called nuclear mosquito, but it could be potentially that this user has entered their password wrong, or clicked enter without entering a password wrong, and then not realize that it's tried to authenticate, and then they've typed in their password and clicked enter again, and so then it's been logged here. In this case, we're able to then use this. So what we want to do is we want to copy this, and we have Ryan.Cooper and nuclear mosquito 3. So we want to check if this is legitimate or not. So we'll do the typical netexec SMB 10.10.11 202-u Ryan.Cooper-P, and then Euler Mosquito. And we have a successful login here. So they are a legitimate account that we can then use. So we've seen three things. We've seen that we're able to find credentials in open shares and public files, and that's a really bad place to store them. We've also seen that MS SQL supports a functionality that allows you to authenticate the server to something else, which means that we can capture the hash there, and that can be disabled. And then thirdly, we're able to look through logs and find credentials in logs. Those are three ways that we can use on internal penetration tests, or when we're doing hack the box machines, that can help us to leverage, like gain a foothold, move around, move laterally. And I think that these are really cool. So to round it out, we shall try WinRM again and see if we got auth, and we do. So we have a pwned there. So we will evil WinRM Ryan Cooper. We will go to his desktop and we'll see the user flag there. So if you want to have a try of these techniques in your own time, I would encourage you to have a look at the escape box from Hack the Box. It is a really great machine to look at these techniques and to have a play around. But yeah, that is how we can find credentials on an internal or on Hack the Box. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it with a friend, share it with someone else if you thought that their techniques were helpful. Let us know in the comments if you have other credential gathering techniques that weren't covered in this video. I know that there are plenty more, but let us know, help us out. Let's work together to build a better methodology so that then we can secure the people that we are pen testing and helping out, improving their security. We will see you in the next one.